Okay, so another short video on this business of fallacies and argumentation. By now, I usually get students asking in class, what is the deal with all of these fallacies? Why bother taking a look at this stuff? Why is this stuff re-emphasized in such classes as communication and even the sciences? It's because they are cross-curricular. That means that they extend across different disciplines and fields that you go into. They're the common expected standards of communication and the things that we need as tools for doing our assignment. But I try to point this out to students by looking at specifics. And let's take a look at a specific. Now, what have I got here? I've got an issue of CQ Researcher. You're used to this source now. You know I use it. I qualified it as a good source before in our class, and we're taking a look at it today to get a look at when people use the fallacies, because they're really using it much more frequently than I think most students and maybe people give them credit for. I could look at CQ Researcher, I could look at any source really, and most good writers, most good sources will discuss the thinking going on in their argument and use at least the language of fallacies, if not the fallacy names themselves. So I'll repeat that in just a second, but let's take a look at an argument and then maybe we'll understand that better. Here's an issue on the reading crisis. I've talked about this before in class too. This is a good issue that I have taken a look at, and no one's working on it, so it'll be fresh for most people. Here's the pro and con argument. People are used to that because most of the CQ Researcher issue has pro and con. Here's Dana Joya, who's got a funny name, but he's a kind of a important fellow because it's a rags to riches story. He was a fellow who had a blue-collar education but then started writing poetry and became famous for that, and then became chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts, and now he's this guy who goes around and speaks about education. Interesting fellow, also editor, publisher, and poet. And he says, now I'm going to bore you a little bit because I'm going to want to go through his short argument. He says, although there has been measurable progress in recent years in reading ability at the elementary school level, all progress appears to halt as children enter their teenage years. There is a general decline in reading among teenage and adult Americans. Most alarming, both reading ability and the habit of regular reading have greatly declined among college graduates. These negative trends have more than literary importance. The declines have demonstrable social, economic, cultural, and civic implications. Now, I'm boring you by reading this. I'll just point out that the whole CQ Researcher actually talks about this decline more specifically, and it's not like he's working without any evidence. He knows that and many of the writers who write for the pro and con arguments know that they're writing for this issue and will try to create a short argument so that people can have a sense of the pro, con. But even CQ Researcher would say that there's another column that you can add on here because you can have 2.5 sides to most issues. Anyway, so he'll not back this up with evidence because he knows that the issues is coming out with the evidence in it. I'm not trying to be a bad writer, he's just trying to get through his argument here. Let's take a look. As Americans, especially younger Americans, read less, they read less well. Because they read less well, they have lower levels of academic achievement. With lower levels of reading and writing ability, people do less well in the job market. Poor reading skills correlate heavily with lack of employment, lower wages, and fewer opportunities for advancement. Deficient readers are less likely to become active in civic and cultural life. There's evidence for this, actually ample evidence too if you're interested. You can look up this issue. And most notably in volunteerism and voting. People are less civically engaged when they read less, is what he's saying. The habit of daily reading, for instance, overwhelmingly correlates with better reading skills and higher academic achievement. On the other hand, poor reading skills correlate with lower level of financial and job success. Whether or not people read, and indeed how much and often they read, affects their lives in crucial ways. Regular reading not only boosts the likelihood of an individual's academic and economic success, but also seems to awaken a person's social and civic sense. Reading correlates with almost every measurement of positive personal and social behavior surveyed. It's reassuring, though hardly amazing, that readers attend more concerts and theater than non-readers, but it's surprising that they exercise more, play more sports, no matter what their educational level. The cold statistics confirm something that most readers know, but have mostly been reluctant to declare as fact: books change lives for the better. Books change lives for the better. The data confirm without any serious qualification the central importance of reading for a prosperous free society. They demonstrate that reading is an irreplaceable activity in developing productive and active adults as well as healthy communities. Whatever the benefits of the newer electronic media, they provide no measurable substitute for frequent reading. If America continues to lose the habit of regular reading, the nation will suffer substantial economic, social, and civil setbacks. Now, I read that whole argument just to get a sense of what he was saying, making the case for reading, but also because of this sentence. If you look at it closely, he's acknowledging that people are making an alternative argument, a counter-argument. His opposition is making the argument that reading won't be a vital skill in the future, and that we can replace it with a lot of electronic stuff. And what he says here is he actually identifies a fallacy in their thinking, or what he would call a fallacy, even though he doesn't call it that. I don't know why that just popped up, but we'll just continue on. So it's called an accident of fortune. Sitting in my office making a little video. This little sentence, though, I think really shows something unique about good people who express their good arguers, people who present their ideas. Whatever the benefits of newer electronic media, they provide no measurable substitute for frequent reading. He is saying that the people who will make arguments that reading might not be as valuable, or you can do the same things through YouTube or through other technology, he says that's a red herring. Reading does something unique to the brain, he says, and the science says. And that it's a red herring to say that it's going to be supplanted or taken over by other technologies. He doesn't call it a red herring, and people sometimes might not use the fallacy, but the fallacy is there. And since we're taking a look at it in Chapter 10, I thought I'd point it out too, that the good writers will talk about the shortcomings in other arguments. Even though they may not use the language of fallacies, they're often thinking about them. Now, let's compare this with Mark Prensky. This is where we're talking about the guy from technology. Now, you may not have heard of Mark Prensky either, just like Dana Gioia, but he's been around a lot too. He's written widely and is a prolific writer about using games and technologies to teach people without reading that much. And you can see he's taking the con position about the same question: will reading remain a vital skill in the 21st century? Okay, I'll take a little bit of his argument too. Now, I have my own position on this, but I look at the opposite side too, and there'd be a third and fourth side too. But look at what Mark Prensky says. He says, reacting to my discussing the need to delete things from the curriculum in order to make room for topics about the future, teachers almost invariably ask some version of the following: but what if the technology breaks down? What will our kids do then? Teachers who ask these questions and voice these opinions often get applause from their colleagues, making them think that they are right in holding these attitudes. But these questions make me realize that we have a real problem, he says. It is a problem because what the teachers are really saying is this: we don't trust the technology of today or the future. We don't trust the world in which you kids are going to live. We believe that way we did things in our time was the real way, the only reliable way. And that's what we want to teach you kids, the basics. Now, I'll stop here, even though there's another fallacy he talks about later on, because he's already identified one. He says, when teachers say, why teach the technological shortcut? Because we should be going back to basics. He's saying that the teachers are responding out of fear. In other words, the other argument, the argument made by Dana Gioia, he would say, the guy on the other side, is an argument that's appealing to our sense of fear. We fear the new thing, and so let's go back to the old thing, the tried, the true, the traditional, the basics. Now, what have I tried to do? I tried to point out how both sides are using actually the ideas of fallacies to respond to the shortcomings in other people's thinking. They're not ridiculing each other, they're not poking each other in the eye, they're not saying you're stupid if you believe anything else. They are saying, look, this thinking will only get you so far. Maybe you'll get applause from your colleagues. Maybe you think you'll find a shortcut, but you really haven't. In this one, he's doing the same sort of approach, identifying a fallacy, but then moving on to offer his case. And there's even another fallacy here, which is an either-or fallacy that comes up later in his argument. I won't go on to that. Let me sum up what I'm trying to say here. Fallacies and the discussion that people have in any comp class, 1108, first-year comp class, and beyond, show the limits of logic. They reinforce the standard expectations for writing and thinking things through. It's one reason why they're repeated across the curriculum, not because we're boring and always repeat ourselves, even though we do that too, but because they're necessary, and we only really discover these things through practice, through taking a look at real arguments, real debates, and finding where the limits of logic occur, such as in the CQ researcher debate. Okay, let's go back to my little thing here. They can let you point out shortcomings in the other sides to the debate. Other people may say this: you're acting out of fear, you found a shortcut, but it's really a red herring. But here's where their thinking falls short and where mine explains or understands more. Now, this is what I'd have you take away from it. The teacher on campus who drills his students on fallacies for 2 months in order for them to get it only has succeeded in having students actually answer maybe a test question, but hasn't been able to make them go further into real life and see where the fallacies are occurring or being identified in real life. when I point to CQ Researcher, that's where I'm pointing to a kind of real life here, I suppose, because the people are debating and they're actually showing the shortcomings in each other's thinking. Why study fallacies? It's so that you can do this. Look at it in real life and where it happens. So I see here down at the bottom, they're commonly expected even if the names aren't used in the arguments you hear, see, or read. I see the language of fallacies used all the time, but I read lots of different stuff. Stuff for teachers, stuff that's hard, stuff that's easy. Even if you don't see it, the writers are frequently thinking about fallacies and the shortcomings in thinking. And that's what I have you pay attention to as you proceed to make your argument strong by pointing out the shortcomings in other people's arguments, by participating in the debate and offering your conclusions as more thought out, less fallacious, and more solid. All right. Write me if you have questions, but I am trying to make this stuff relevant as best I can and explain the reason for why this is one of those rhetorical modes, and there it comes again, that is required by the U of M and by most colleges across the nation. So, good luck.